Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel and my living room, because that's where we are right now, in front of a green screen. But I want to redo this video. I actually made this video before, but I feel like I could do it better, and I want to kind of do this video with the aim to try to help you guys make some decisions out there. If you guys are split between a positive displacement supercharger like a Whipple or a centrifugal supercharger like an ESS for your Mustang. Okay, two things to start off with this video though is I'm gonna use different terms for positive displacement and centrifugal superchargers. I'm just gonna kind of go with the name brand because it makes it a little bit easier and there's less syllables. It's just easier on my brain. So I know there's a lot of different brands out there for positive displacement superchargers. There's the Whipple, there's the VMP, which essentially are actually the exact same supercharger. And then there's the Roush, which is slightly different, but generally, most people are going with the Whipple when it comes to supercharging, using a positive displacement supercharger on a Gen 3 or Gen 4 Coyote. And then for the centrifugal supercharger, I'm gonna just refer to as an ESS because that's kind of the brand that most people go with. It seems to be very tried and true and the most affordable and even kind of the most user-friendly. So I know on the ESS side, see, I already did it. On the centrifugal side, I know there's like Vortec, there's Procharger, there's a few different ones out there. But ESS is kind of the main one it seems like everybody sort of goes with. So for this video, I'm really gonna be talking to you guys about a Whipple versus an ESS type of supercharger. And the second thing is what I meant by kind of help you guys make a decision is when I was first researching which supercharger to go with, I feel like I didn't really get a whole lot of information on YouTube or in the forums. Like I kind of got like piecemeal information that I had to like put together for myself. So I kind of want to make this all in one shot, one take video for you guys that'll kind of help you there because you'll find a lot of videos online. Like they'll explain the differences between the two, you know, the mechanical differences, but they won't really give you a relatively decent kind of use case application scenario for should I go with a positive displacement or should I go with a centrifugal supercharger? So that's what I'm here to help with, hopefully. Now, just for the sake of this video, I am going to quickly go over mechanically how those two different superchargers work. It's gonna be like a really rudimentary explanation, so just bear with me. But I assume there may be people out there that may not know exactly what the difference is, so here's what it is. So the way a Whipple supercharger works is there's a rotor pack, okay? And the rotor pack consists of, well, two rotors. And what they do is they take in ambient air, they funnel it into the rotors. Usually they have about 160-degree helix to them. So they just kind of have a twist. They're not straight cut rotors, they're more helical really in design. And they force air through an intercooler after it's compressed and then into the cylinder heads. And that's how that compression works. Now the way the supercharger is driven is off the accessory drive. And this is gonna be the same for both Whipples and ESS. Both of them are accessory driven, and that's kind of what makes them a supercharger, where a turbocharger runs off expend energy from the exhaust. With a supercharger, it runs off the accessory drive. Now, an ESS supercharger is a little bit more similar to a conventional turbocharger. So like I said, an ESS runs off the accessory drive on the engine. It's not exhaust gases, but it does actually have a spinning turbine or a compressor blade like a turbocharger does. So that compressor blade takes in air, compresses it, as the name goes, routes it through an intercooler and then into the cylinder heads of the engine. So that's just kind of like a quick synopsis of how these two superchargers work. So the big question I had, and I'm hoping to help you guys out with this, is which one should I go with? Like I get the mechanical differences, but which one should I pick? And I have, if you guys don't know already, I have a Whipple Gen 4 Coyote Mustang. So I definitely can speak a lot to the Whipples, but before I did this video, I tried to research ESS or centrifugal superchargers on Coyotes as much as I could, just to gather as much information and try to piece it together all for you guys in one video. So I think the distinction is, are you really trying to win races? I think that's probably the biggest question you guys have to ask yourself. Do you want to have either the most fun, or are you serious about winning races or going the absolute the absolute fastest you can down the time track. So this is what I think really separates these kind of two different superchargers. Now, taking the Whipple, if you look at a dyno graph with it, okay? So you're just looking at, the output of the power curve. The way a naturally aspirated Coyote is gonna look, and kind of like most engines really, is, if they're naturally aspirated, is you're just gonna have that slow, steady, pretty gradual, pretty linear climb to the top when it comes to power. So what a Whipple is gonna do on that graph is take that line and raise it, okay? You are gonna have a consistent power delivery all throughout the RPM range. So a Whipple is gonna maintain the linear power band that you generally have with a Coyote. I know they wake up a little bit more at 4,000 RPMs, but that power band is not really gonna change. It's simply just going to increase because you're increasing power. Now with an ESS, that's gonna be a little bit different. So with an ESS, instead of a typical linear increase in the dyno graph, you're actually gonna have really more of an exponential increase. So like a turbo, an ESS does have to spool up in order for it to make meaningful, significant boosts where you're actually gonna make more power. So in the low RPMs, an ESS car is gonna feel pretty much stock. And until you get up to 4,000 or 5,000 RPMs, and with some nuance there, you can change gearing, you can change pulley sizes. Where you sort of start entering that power band, you can, there is some change to that you can make yourself on an ESS setup, but an ESS is gonna have an exponential increase at the top end of the RPMs. So when I first was kind of learning this, I kind of figured, like, why would you ever take an ESS power graph over a Whipple power graph? Like, a Whipple is gonna make more power more of the time. Even if you're comparing like an 8,000 wheel horsepower ESS Mustang or an 8,000 wheel horsepower Whipple Mustang, the end state in power at the same, whether 7,500 RPMs or 8,000 RPM redline is gonna be roughly the same, right? If both are making 800 wheel horsepower, but the Whipple is gonna make more power more of the time. And at first it just kind of makes sense to go with a Whipple. Why wouldn't you want to make more power more of the time, of which you wouldn't with an ESS? You're gonna be lagging behind if you're into lower RPMs, granted if you're like in a race with a Whipple Mustang. But there's some advantages to not making all of your power in the low end RPMs. And I think they're pretty significant. So the first thing to consider is a Whipple, especially if you're a manual car, okay? Which on this channel, it's manual or die. Manuals just kind of give main character energy, and that's what we're after. So we don't do automatics here. But for you 10 or 80 guys, okay? Again, we respect you guys are fast, but our cars are definitely more fun. But especially with a manual car, a Whipple Mustang is gonna be far harder to get off the line than an ESS car. An ESS car launching is gonna be relatively similar in terms of fighting for traction as an NA Coyote, where a Whipple Mustang is not gonna be like that at all. Whipple Mustangs are just incredibly hard to get off the line. Like, they're just notorious for not having great dig times. Obviously, you get better with skill, you get better with launching the car. Obviously, having a drag pack on the rear, being on a prep surface, this is gonna be very advantageous to the Whipple. But of course, you can do the exact same thing with the ESS. They're just gonna be not as steep of a learning curve in terms of launching your Mustang on an ESS than it will be on a Whipple. So ESSs generally gonna beat Mustangs that have Whipples on them, given that you guys have relatively same horsepower levels in a dig race. Generally speaking, that's probably what's gonna happen, because the ESS is gonna get off the line a little bit faster, just because it's just a lot easier to launch. And once you're up there in the RPMs, you're up there in the RPMs, okay? Like, high RPM ESS is gonna be about the same boost, about the same power, all things considering. Again, I'm kind of running with this 800 wheel horsepower ESS versus Whipple sort of example, but the ESS is probably just gonna do better in a dig race. Now, one thing to note with ESSs, this is not something I've experienced because I've never actually driven an ESS Mustang. Well, I actually have driven an ESS Camaro, but never driven an ESS Mustang. Is some people have reported with a manual transmission car, when you upshift, okay, say you're going first to second or second to third, what happens is because sometimes on the ESS, the power band in the IRPMs is so tight that when you shift, you're actually falling below the power band and you have to climb yourself back into it to make the power again. Now with a 10 or 80 car, this generally is not so much of an issue, just because a 10 or 80 car, you have more gears. Those gears are just closely packed together, a lot more so than an MT82 car. So just something to keep in mind. But also too, if you're really going after the fastest car, if you're really trying to make like the fastest runs on the drag strip or beat people on the highway in Mexico, because we don't do street racing here in America, you're probably buying the 10 or 80, just because the 10 or 80s, they're just faster than MT82s. Not as fun, but an MT82 car, you know, given like for like, is never gonna outrun a 10 or 80 car. Now, even in roll racing, this is also too where I think the ESS just has a little bit of an advantage over the Whipple. Like in dig racing, the ESS definitely has an advantage, but even in roll racing, I think that's sort of the case too. Because from personal experience, on the highway, if you're in second gear, third gear, fourth gear, and you jab the throttle, it's very, very easy to break the rear wheels loose. Obviously, especially if you're in the high RPMs, but with an ESS, this is a far more controllable condition where you can punch the throttle, but you're enough out of the power band where you probably won't be fighting for traction, at least on that initial throttle pull. So even on the highway, in ESS, I still think is probably gonna do better in roll racing than a Whipple. And that's just because the torque delivery is not so immediate as it's going to be in a Whipple. So you don't really have to worry about feathering the throttle. Just get your RPMs low enough in an ESS where you're not making full boost before you hit the throttle, and you're probably gonna be okay on the highway in a roll race. So this is what I mean. If you guys are after the fastest car to make, you know, the greatest 0 to 60 times or quarter mile times or eighth mile times, whatever it is, I think ESS really is the route to go with. Even if you're a manual car, even if you're a 10 or 80 car, ESS probably is going to be the pick that I would recommend if you guys are truly seeking the fastest car. Now, what are the Whipple's advantages? Because there's still some pros and cons here. The Whipple, I think, is by far and away the more fun type of supercharger. Now, this is definitely a subjective preference kind of thing, but generally speaking, most people are probably going to find a Whipple a more enjoyable car to drive. And also too, it really has some great like highway pulling power. You don't have to worry about getting your RPMs up to really start making boost. Even like in fifth gear on the highway, you can very easily pass people. And sometimes even in sixth too, if they're going slow enough. But the Whipple, I think, genuinely is the more fun supercharger. And I think it kind of leads to a better daily driving car as well. I know that sounds a little crazy because you're pushing your low RPMs way beyond what they would feel like stock, where an ESS is gonna feel pretty much stock below 5,000 RPMs. But you're spending a lot of money on a supercharger. You kind of want to use a supercharger whenever you want it at any RPM. At least that's kind of how I view it. So for a Whipple, I think that's probably the choice you want to make if you're truly after just the most fun car, the most enjoyment. So I think a Whipple is probably the supercharger you may want to go to or go with if you're looking for just the most fun ride that you can experience. That's how it definitely feels for me. Now I don't ever plan to change my 2025 Mustang away from a Whipple, but I do want an ESS Mustang in my life. I know every video I come to you guys with, I'm telling you there's a different Mustang I want, so it kind of changes depending on my mood. But a Mach 1, I feel like would be just the best Mustang to ESS, just because it has that Tremec transmission. Now, I know a lot of people Whipple them too, and that'd be pretty sweet. But to me, I don't know, something just like emotionally feels correct with a Mach 1 in the ESS. It just feels right. So just to recap, if you guys are truly going after the fastest kind of supercharger in terms of the best times you can lay down or seriously trying to beat people in races, I think the ESS is just a more manageable type of supercharger where, yes, you are not making as much power as much of the time when it comes with comparison to the Whipple, but it's just far more easier to manage both on launch and even in roll racing where you're just punching the throttle, where a Whipple, that's not so much the case. But if you're looking for the most enjoyment, And especially if you have a manual car, I think the Whipple is probably the best choice there. And also too, like I was saying with an ESS, if you have a manual car, and again, you can change this with gear ratios, there is some tuning and tweaking you can do, but I have seen a lot of people reporting online that like, whenever you upshift on an ESS, you can drop far enough outside of the power band where you have to climb back into it to make your boost again and make, you know, your max peak power. With a Whipple, you just always have all your power on demand whenever you want it in any RPM. And there's definitely a beauty to that, especially a tire ruining beauty. You're gonna go through tires probably quicker on a Whipple than you are gonna be on it with an ESS at least. And one last thing to mention when it comes to Whipple versus ESS. This one is a little bit harder to prove, or I guess to flesh out, but generally speaking, an ESS is gonna be a little bit easier on parts than a Whipple is. Power in low RPMs seems to be harsher on engine components than power in higher RPMs. I read this online, but I don't know. Maybe take my word for it with a grain of salt, but that kind of seems to be the case, or at least the general consensus. Also too, with an ESS, that more gradual, kind of steady roll on or more graceful application of that torque on the engine is generally going to be considered a little bit more gentle than with a Whipple, where the torque is delivered immediately upon throttle response. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, for supercharging your car, it's going to be a little bit more brutal on the engine regardless, but hopefully that helps. I know this kind of seems like an ESS is better than a Whipple, and I think in a lot of cases it probably is, as I have my Whipple car. As I'm sitting here with my Whipple Mustang, definitely wanting an ESS one. But hopefully that kind of helps you guys. Hopefully this is, you know, somewhat valuable to you guys, you know, sort of make a decision. At least it was a decision I had to make. So I'm hoping I kind of packed this all into one video that helps you guys if you guys are truly deciding that you're going to supercharge your Mustang and you're not sure if you want to go the centrifugal route or the positive displacement route. So I appreciate you guys watching. I'm going to give you my typical shtick. Don't worry about liking, commenting, or subscribing. I want you guys to do it on your own volition. If you guys are here, watch my channel, getting entertainment or value out of it, that means the world to me. So I couldn't ask for more, but I appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Don't get frustrated.